Welcome to this session, Copyright and Online Resources for ELA. I'm Robin Dixon, pre-K through 5th grade ELA Social Studies Consulting Teacher, and I will be presenting this session today. There will be places during the presentation for you to pause, jot, and reflect. You may do this individually, or you may do this with a group of your colleagues via Zoom or another platform. Let's begin by looking at our learning intentions. Our learning intention is to learn to understand copyright and fair use in terms of classroom, remote, and hybrid learning. You will be successful when you can define copyright and fair use and determine how to apply copyright and fair use to materials used in your online and in-person classroom. Should you have questions during this presentation, please send those to me or to Ms. Diane Leopold, who is the District Consulting Teacher for Library Media Science. And both of our emails are listed on this slide. And you may also reach out to your library media specialist who can give you additional information concerning copyright and fair use. Let's begin by taking a moment to pause, jot, and reflect. Copyright is a serious topic for educators. Take a moment to reflect on what you already know about copyright and fair use. What do you want to know more about? And as an educator, what concerns do you have about copyright and fair use in your classroom? So please take a moment to pause the video, reflect, share with your colleagues if you are doing this with colleagues, and when you are ready, begin the video again and proceed to the next slide. I hope you had a great discussion. Let's begin with some definitions. Let's begin by defining copyright. Merriam-Webster defines copyright as the exclusive legal right to reproduce, copy, sell, or distribute the matter and form of something, such as a literary, musical, or artistic work. A couple of notes on copyright. Materials before 1923 fall under public domain, and if it was published before 1923, you do not have to have special permission in order to use it. It is public domain. Copyrighted materials are also labeled with appropriate markings to let you know if it is a copyrighted material or if you have permission to use that. And you'll see a website listed that's www.copyright.gov/records. That's going to be a website to help you determine if a material is copyrighted. So let's take a look at that website. So when I go to the website, it takes me to a place that looks like this. And you can simply type in what you're searching for to find out if it's copyrighted. So let's say I want to find out if Winnie the Pooh is copyrighted. Oops, let's type that correctly. So you will be able to see all of the results that are copyrighted. You will see that there are 1,956 copyrighted Winnie the Pooh images, pictures, etc. So if I come down here and it says Art of Winnie the Pooh right here under item 10, notice that I will scroll over. It will give me a copyright number and also a year. So I know that if I go here that this is going to be something that is copyrighted. And you'll also notice that it is by Disney. Word of note, most, if not all, Disney items are copyrighted, so there is no surprise there. So that site will help you to determine if a piece of work is copyrighted. Now, in the world of copyright, something else to take note of is something called a Creative Commons license. And you'll see a website, creativecommons.org, and this allows you to see if a work has a Creative Commons license that the creator has made, which allows you to use a work for various purposes. So I could go in there and I could go to creativecommons.org, type in what I'm searching for, and find out if there's a common license. Please note that you do have to give appropriate attribution to the creator so that your audience knows where that work came from. And you'll see below that is there's a site called search.creativecommons.org that allows one to find materials that already have a Creative Commons license that you can, that the creator has given access for people to use. So let's take a moment to see how that site would work. All right, so when I log in and I go search.creativecommons.org, you'll see I would like to see, and let's type in Winnie the Pooh again and see what happens. So you will see that all of these items have Creative Commons license. So these are pictures that I have permission to use. Now, if I come over here for use on the left-hand side, I can type if I want that this is going to be commercial use or if I'm going to adapt it. The next one is license. The two that we're going to focus on are Creative Commons license and public domain mark. So if I click public domain and I search, it's going to show me pictures that I have permission to use. And you'll see here's a picture, the real Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin flattened. So this picture means that it has a Creative Commons license that I have permission to use that picture. And if I keep scrolling, I'll see a picture of Eeyore. And then to the right of that, I'll see the Kemp family. So these are all pictures that I would be okay in using. Or excuse me, those are public domain pictures. So I would be okay using those for public domain. So let's look at Creative Commons license. So when I click that, you'll see here are some pictures that I have permission to use that have Creative Commons licenses. So as I scroll, I want this picture of Winnie the Pooh stuffed animal. I can click on that and know that I am okay because it has a Creative Commons license. So if you're ever in doubt if something has a copyright or you're okay to use it, those are two great places to go on the government website or Creative Commons to determine if you're okay in using that image. So let's look at fair use. That's the next term that we need to know. So let's see how fair use is defined according to the Stanford University Library. It says, in its most general sense, a fair use is any copying of copyrighted material done for a limited and transformative purpose, such as to comment upon, criticize, or parody a copyrighted work. Such use can be done without permission from the copyright owner. In other words, fair use is a defense against a claim of copyright infringement. If your use qualifies as fair use, then it would not be considered an infringement. And note that transformative purposes include such things as classroom teaching. And there are 4 questions that we need to consider when looking at fair use policy. Number 1, the purpose and character of your use. Education tends to be favored. Scholarship or nonprofit education institutions tend to be favored purposes. Number 2, the nature of the copyrighted work. Again, favored. Published works, important to favored educational objectives. So you'll notice that education tends to fall under fair use more than other organizations or groups. Number 3, the amount is substantiability of the portion taken. Small quantities and amount is appropriate for favored educational purpose. And near the end of the presentation, you will see detailed information for educators about what small quantities would be considered in poetry, in books, etc. And number 4, the effect of the use on the potential market and what tends to be favored. User owns lawfully purchased acquired copy of original work. 1 or fewer copies is made. So if I have an original copy that I have purchased, that's going to be much more favored. So on fair use, we also need to think about ideas, themes, and facts cannot be copyrighted. Fair use is much more broadly applied to non-commercial work than commercial work. If you are not profiting on the work, you get much more latitude. And a note, under 10% is best, 20% is high risk. So we want to keep that fair use under 10%. As we approach the 20% mark, we're at very high risk for breaking fair use and copyright law. So let's take a moment to pause, jot, and reflect. What did you learn about copyright and fair use? How might this affect your online classroom? What kind of media do you use that would need copyright and fair use laws? Take a moment to pause, reflect, and answer the questions. When you're ready, proceed to the next slide. So let's take a moment about how this applies in the Topeka Public Schools. I'm going to share with you the district website for copyright and fair use. It is listed here, and you can find this under the TPS website. So let's take a moment to look at that website where we can find information about our district's policy concerning copyright and fair use. So here is what the website looks from the TPS Library Media Services. So you will see right here, it gives us a note. This is an increasingly significant topic related to intellectual property and digital citizenship. Interpretation of copyright and public performance laws and guidelines alter as technology and media change. So here are some resources that you should consider clicking on to make sure that you are following correct copyright. So the first one is General Fair Use of Copyright. So this talks about the district copyright policy. It defines fair use. And again, you'll see those 4 questions that we talked about just a moment ago. And again, we'll see public performance, and we'll see license and contracts. So this is important. Public performance is important. If we're printing something on the internet, this is what we have to keep in mind. Fair use exemption. So make sure that you are familiar with this. We also see posting notice for equipment which can duplicate copyrighted materials. We need to be careful with how we're using our equipment. We also have our policy and warning concerning recorded video programs without permission, copyright restrictions. Again, we want to make sure that we're familiar and what we're using this for instructional purposes. Must occur in the classroom, and teachers and students must be in a face-to-face instructional situation. So if you're wanting to put something on from a video that you have found online or that you have found on television, we have to make sure that we're being extremely careful with these requirements. We also see TPS video resources and use of those resources. So again, this gives us very stringent guidelines. So on the TPS Library Media Services, we have all of the information that we need concerning our district's expectations. Now, here are some general rules to keep in mind. Books. We know that books and reading out loud on Zoom has become something popular to do since the spring. But here are some things that we need to keep in mind. If reading a story and recording it, it can be posted to small groups of students / parents and still be in compliance with public performance rights and copyright under fair use guidelines. Posts to Seesaw Group classrooms should be okay, as those are considered classrooms. But we do not want to post videos of teaching onto social media, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So let's look at videos. Do not post videos of book recordings with open access on YouTube, Facebook, or any other social networking site where everyone can access them. This does not comply with fair use. So we cannot be putting those things on social media or on YouTube. No infringement if the work is in public domain or not something that is copyrightable. So if you're looking at something before March 1st of 1989, you will be fine because it will be considered public domain in the video realm. Also, if the term of its copyright protection has ended, and usually copyright protection extends for approximately 70 years, the material is used in such a way that it does not implicate the rights of one of the copyright holders, or its copyright material has been placed in public domain and has been put in public domain using Creative Commons public domain dedication. So we want to make sure that if we're using something from the author, that the author is giving us permission to post those videos and books and things. Now, when we think about images, and we're creating presentations for students, or students are creating presentations to share, we also need to be extremely careful with our use of images. And on any Google platform, you have in the bottom right-hand corner a plus that looks like between a plus and a star. That is the Explorer. And when you click that Explorer to search for pictures, it will put you in contact with pictures that you do have permission to post. So if you use that Explorer feature, your pictures will be fine. Also, if you use sites such as pexels.com or unsplash.com, they will also give you free images to use. And the images that are not public domain, you also have the ability to purchase use of that picture. And if you're using an image, make sure that you credit the source for the image. So let's look at videos a little bit more. So YouTube and Vimeo have a large amount of videos that are published under the Creative Commons license, and you will be able to find that as you search and look at the video. So if it has a Creative Commons license on YouTube or Vimeo, then you are okay using that video. And the note on Netflix. Netflix allows one-time educational screenings of some of its documentaries. So if you are using a documentary to show online, or a segment from your Google Classroom or your, Seesaw Classroom, know that some of those you have permission to use. Now, let's take a moment to look at copyright and fair use for educators. I have a link to a PDF that's going to take you to something that looks exactly like this screen. So let's click on this and see what comes up. And you will see that it's going to bring up a PDF. And it says copyright and fair use guidelines for teachers. Because often in the educational realm, if it is being used for an educational purpose, there is more latitude for education than many other areas. And so if you're wanting to know if you can use something for Seesaw, or use something in a digital format, or in a printed format, this is going to give you great information. So you'll notice that it starts with printed material, such as poems. So it says poems less than 250 words, articles or short stories less than 2,500 words, excerpt from a longer work, 10%, and we saw that before, 10% or 1,000 words, whichever is less, one picture or diagram per book. What you can do. So teachers can make multiple copies for classroom use and incorporate multimedia for teaching classes. Students may incorporate text into multimedia projects. So again, you'll see that there's some flexibility there for teachers. Now, over in the fine print column, we want to look and we want to make sure that we're reading the fine print or the details. And you'll notice for printed materials, for example, it says, copies may be made from one legally acquired original. So that means I'm using a book that I purchased, not a book that I borrowed from someone, book that I purchased. Only allow one copy per student. Teachers may make copies in 9 instances per classroom per term. So you'll notice that they've also got stipulations on the amount of times. Usage must be at the instance and inspiration of a single teacher, not from the district. You can't take those smaller pieces and create anthologies. And you cannot copy workbooks, things, and consumables. Notice it also gives us guidelines for archived printed material, illustrations and photographs, videos, which we were talking about. So notice that it has videotapes purchased, videotapes rented, DVDs. It says teachers may use these materials in the classroom. Copies may be made for archival purposes to replace lost or damaged copies. And notice that it says it must be legitimately acquired. So it has to be something that you have legally purchased. Material must be used in a classroom or nonprofit environment dedicated to face-to-face instruction. And it should be used for instructional, not entertainment or reward. So you'll notice that there are some very specific guidelines for teachers. So that was videos for viewing. Here's videos for integration into multimedia or video projects. We then see a category for music, for computer software, for internet, and television. So as you're looking forward with using multimedia in your classroom, as well as in your online classroom, these are items to keep in mind on this sheet. So feel free to print this out and keep it for reference. I have also listed for you a bit.ly and 3 other websites and documents, PDFs, to help you in looking at media use in your classrooms concerning copyright and fair use. So let's take a look at each one of these. Here's the first one. Notice that this is another copyright and fair use, and you are more than welcome to print this and use this. And notice that it says what is copyright, what is fair use. Copyright and fair use, it has educational resources. Again, you'll notice that Disney is on here, and we know that many of Disney's items are copyrighted and items that we are not able to use easily. And so you have additional links that you can go to see if you are meeting copyright law. So printable PDF, here's a fair use checklist, guidelines, so a plethora of resources on this page. Now let's look at the second one, the Education World article. Again, this is a 5-part series on Educator's Guide to Copyright and Fair Use. So you'll notice copyrights and copying wrongs. As you walk through here, it will take you through 5 different sessions right here. Copyright and copying wrongs is fair use of license to steal, copyright law and new technologies. Those are extremely important because in our digital age, copyright and fair use continue to change. So 3 and 4 would be extremely valuable to read and study. Now let's look at the third one from the University of California. Again, copyright in the classroom. This is just going to walk you through additional items to consider as you are working in your classroom as well as digitally with resources. Copies for the classroom, copies for teacher, online and distance education. So another valuable resource to go to. And let's go to the bit.ly and see what the bit.ly provides for us. So if we come over here and we type the bit.ly in, this one talks specifically about copyright in the digital age. So when we're looking at what does copyright look like with digital media, this will be your, an excellent site for you to go to determine what copyright looks like with digital media. So I'd like you to take some time to go through those websites and those materials, either individually or with your colleagues. If you're going through with your colleagues, possibly divide and conquer those resources. And what were some ahas for you? And what will you do to ensure you're not breaking these policies in your online and personal classroom? What might you need to change? So take about 10 to 15 minutes to go through those websites, determine what was new learning for you, And what do you need to consider going forward uh, with copyright and fair use in your classroom in person and online? So please pause the video and spend the next 10 to 15 minutes reviewing the websites, the PDFs, and the bit.ly from the previous page. You may pause, and when you are ready, you may unpause and proceed to the next slide. I hope you found those websites helpful. And as we finish for today, let's review our learning intention. We learned to understand copyright and fair use in terms of classroom, remote, and hybrid learning. And you are successful if you can define copyright and fair use and determine how to apply copyright and fair use to materials used in your online and in-person classroom. And I want to thank you for taking the time to learn about how copyright and fair use may impact the resources and materials that you use in your classroom, as well as in your digital classroom through Seesaw, Zoom, etc. And again, please feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns.